Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AI Pro Plus. It's me again, Guy. I'm sorry. Just people don't want to do stuff and I'm here. Got to pump out content, don't we, people? But I am joined by the Vice President of the Alberto Moreno fan club, Olli Emmerson. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Guy, and I'm honoured to be here with you. I'm happy that you're here. It's been a while. We've not been able to talk Alberto Moreno for a long time, and I'm sure we can shoehorn some Moreno content in today, no problem.
Absolutely. If we're struggling for stuff to talk about, which we won't because the season, all that jazz, we will pick our favourite Albie hairstyle. How about that?
There's always room for Moreno, as you well know.
Absolutely. Apart from in Klopp's heart, prick.
Apart from in the Liverpool team, there's always room for Moreno.
Absolutely. It was a good 4-month run that one season, but hey-ho. We will move on.
Of Andy Robertson.
Yes, taught him everything he knows. But hey, football, it's crap, isn't it? Or was. But what's your thoughts on the season so far? I mean, it's weird because we're having the break after the Ajax game where it looked, well, hopefully a corner was turned, but before that, I was a miserable prick. I'm sure most of the Liverpool fandom was, but what are your thoughts?
It's been a rough start to the season. I think it's one of those where you've got to try and take it with a sense of perspective of, we've had riches in the last few years, and one tricky start to the season doesn't kind of discredit everything that's gone before, and there hasn't become a bad group of players. But equally, when you're sat there on your Saturday afternoon, your Sunday afternoon, or your Tuesday, Wednesday evening, watching us playing pretty awfully and getting embarrassed at times by some pretty awful teams, Crystal Palace, Fulham, Man United, I'm looking at you, and Everton can add to that list. It's not been great, has it? But on the plus side, we're a fraction of the way through the season. Man City have dropped points. Spurs are Tottenham, so they're not going to really do anything. They'll choke. Arsenal see what I just said about Spurs, and we're still in the Champions League. So as bad as it's been, weirdly enough, I think if we can turn things around, everything's still to play for.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the only scary thing about the league is that City have looked vulnerable as well, and we've almost wasted their bad patch as well by having our bad patch. That's probably the one negative in that regard. But yeah, if Man City's vulnerabilities don't get fixed, where I think ours are more fixable just by personnel alone. Whereas you look at theirs defensively, except bringing Laporte back in, I don't think that's as big a jump as us having Thiago available.
No, it's not.
So yeah, I think we can make a bigger improvement, but they've just unfortunately signed a cheat code of a freak up front.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy, isn't it? The whole Haaland thing. Like, you are just hoping that he will come and flatter to deceive. And I think in the Community Shield, he had loads of chances, missed a few. And, obviously you've got social media going after him and we won, and it's all great and it's fun. But yeah, I think, he's going to take some of those chances. Unless he is doing his best Timo Werner impression, he is going to start taking some of those chances. And my God, he has done, hasn't he? He's an absolute joke, and that's the problem now with City, is that they can play badly, but he will get them out of jail. Conversely, though, on the other hand, I do kind of believe the argument that in an aspect, I think he might make them worse at times, in the sense that he will make them a bit more predictable and maybe a little bit lazy in their tactics. If it gets to a point of, well, let's give it to Haaland and see what happens. That being said, though, the tactic so far of let's give it to Haaland and see what happens has been working quite well. And I think you made a really good point there, Guy, about when we won the you sort of mentioning that City have stumbled and we haven't capitalised, it made me think of when we won the league. I might have my dates wrong, but I'm pretty sure in their City's first sort of 5 or 6 league games, they lost at Norwich, I think 3-2, I remember.
Yes.
And then I'm pretty sure they lost at home to Wolves as well. And I think there were some other drop points in there too, kind of culminating in when we beat them at Anfield 3-1, I think it was. We kind of, at that point, that was us with a 7 or 8 point lead. So even though we kind of went on, were pretty much flawless until COVID kicked in, it did give us a little bit of leeway. Whereas you say, now, whilst just saying, City have looked vulnerable and it's not that they're not going to drop any more points, based on our performances, we're definitely going to drop some more points if we keep up like this. And you do start to think, with the standard that's been required to win the league in previous years, are we out of the run already? I'd say probably not, but I think we need to see some serious changes after what's going to feel like the world's longest international break, in order to kind of start recuperating things and start charging towards the top. Because our next few games aren't easy either, are they? I think we've got Brighton at home next. We've got a resurgent Arsenal team. I think when we play City, I'm not sure in what order. So the problem is, if we were going to play poorly, we may as well have lost our games to the Arsenals of the world, because we've kind of had we've had the easy fixtures. We've had United, we've had Everton, games we should be winning. And we've got some tough ones to come. Whereas even if we start to play better, which would be pretty difficult to play any worse, we're still going to have tricky games and probably drop some more points.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we literally can't play worse than we have in some of these games. The Napoli game is the worst of Klopp's era. The United game was embarrassingly blunt or just unorganised. I mean, the midfield that day was horrendous. Even games like Fulham, just uncharacteristically sloppy. Everton matches can always turn into a ball fest, and sometimes we snuck a win, sometimes we didn't. So that one's not the worst. It was a bad performance, but it wasn't the most concerning thing this season. It was just like a crap pile on what the season was already. That's the only issue with that one. But yeah, let's go through some of the players rather than the team performances, because some of the team performances literally feel about 2 years ago with how times moved recently. But Van Dijk is an interesting one, and we didn't name him in the ones we picked out, but I just did Rate Don't Hate, where we rated the players from the season. And I know you're young, Ollie, so you will have a lot of non-Liverpool fans on Twitter and stuff like that. But when you see this, I'm going to call it nonsense, but you might disagree. But when you see this nonsense that other fans seemingly say he's finished and he's washed up and stuff like that, I just don't see it. I don't think he's of the same level he was possibly the end of last season and certainly before he was injured, but I still think he's mostly fine. I think there's the odd situation like giving away penalties as un-Van Dijk-like, but I think he's mostly been fine. The system's just destroyed.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would say, in the sense that I don't think Van Dijk needs to necessarily change much. Like you say, he's had a couple of dodgy moments, with penalty against Fulham, for example. But like you say, I don't think he's been the problem. I think that if the unit around Van Dijk, and when I say that, I mean Robertson, I mean Trent, and I mean the midfield, if that goes back to the levels it's been at in the previous years, I think Van Dijk will automatically look like his old self. I think his performances, whilst, like you say, not being maybe his best, have been by no means poor. And they're just being directly influenced by the fact that he's having to do different things to normal because those around him haven't been as good. And I think it's hard to go after individuals, because you could say like Trent's been poor at times, you could say the midfield's been poor at times, you could say Robertson's been poor at times, but there's knock-on reasons for all of that. You could argue that Trent's been poor because he's had Harvey Elliott in front of him, who's not the typical kind of is going to come back and cover as much. You can argue that Robertson's been poor, but Robertson's played a ridiculous amount of football in the last couple of years. You could argue that Fabinho's had ropey moments, but Fabinho's been playing in midfield on his own at times. And I think it's all this kind of knock-on problem that almost stems from the injuries in the midfield, and obviously in Robertson's case, just not having the rest at all. But going back specifically to Van Dijk, I live with a friend of mine who's an Arsenal fan who knew I was coming on the podcast tonight and said, "Oh, are you going to talk about how Van Dijk's lost his aura?" To which I straight away came back with, you need to stop getting your opinions from football Twitter. But I don't think he has. Maybe in the eyes of opposition fans, where every kind of short mistake gets clipped and retweeted a million times. But I think all that does is just show how good Van Dijk is and how good he's been over the last few years, that he can make one or two mistakes and it's got 10,000 retweets. from my own perspective, when I'm dissecting Liverpool's performances this season and thinking, right, why are we off the pace? Why have we, lost these games, fallen behind so quickly in the league? The performances of Van Dijk is nowhere near the top of the list of problems for me. So, yeah, I think it's just because he is such a big name, any little mistake draws attention. Opposition fans, it's not so interesting to say, oh, Liverpool are washed because they've got a 37-year-old playing in midfield. It's much more interesting to say, oh, Van Dijk's lost it, etc., etc., etc. When if they took a little bit of a closer look, I think you'd see that's probably not the case.
Well, you mentioned the midfield there. Dare we jump into that mess?
Oh, dare we? I mean, we could probably jump into the midfield ourselves if we get any more injuries.
Well, that's true.
The midfield. I mean, do you want to go first?
Do you think Naby Keita is actually injured?
Oh Christ, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, let's start with that.
I feel like he was injured when it all came out that he was missing this game and that game, purely because if it was a scenario whereby he wasn't injured and he, because of all the transfer stuff and whatever the controversy that we don't know whether that come out, I don't see why he wouldn't have gone out on loan or we wouldn't have sold him. Bearing in mind, we were actively trying to bring midfielders in. I'm sure that if we really wanted to, we could have seen a scenario where we got another midfielder in alongside Arthur and let Keita go. I don't think that we would keep Keita just to not play him to save face. But it's tricky because Klopp traditionally throughout his tenure at Liverpool, and maybe potentially at Dortmund, I just haven't done the research, is just unbelievably tight-lipped when it comes to injuries. Players will get injured and you'll just have no idea what it is. Henderson will go off with what looks like a dead leg and they'll get told, oh, it's just a knock, he'll be back in a week, and then he misses 4 months. Some players, you get told it's going to be 6-7 months and they're back after 3-4. So it's so hard to see, but if he's not injured and he is fit to play, or at least fit to play some sort of part, then it's an absolute embarrassment that he's not playing unless, like you say, there is something we're not privy to that has gone really wrong behind the scenes. But like I say, surely if that was the case, then he wouldn't be at the club. I don't think we'd have kept him around. So based on that conclusion, yeah, I do think he's injured, but whether it's the severity of a certain injury or something on behind the scenes, I think we're definitely only getting half the story from the club and from those around it.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Because the thing with Keita, you're like, I wouldn't put my house on the fact he's not injured. But just
it was that quote from Klopp. It was like, oh, he
fell.
He was fine and he fell crazy. And it's just, you could sum up Naby Keita's Liverpool career in one sentence. Because I mean, honestly, like if you look at if we've got Keita this season, he's had really good performances against United in the past. We probably win one of the
if you swap Milner's
games.
If you swap Milner out those games into Naby, I think we're in a much better position.
I think we've got at least 3 or 4 more points in the league. I would probably still. I don't think he could have solved the Napoli mess up on his own, but I think we'd be a lot more comfortable in the league at least. And again, we'd have had like the likes of Milner would have to play less, so when he did play, he might have looked better. And then again, you've got that knock-on effect. So yeah, he's got to be injured surely, because unless he's killed one of the staff members' children, what he's got to be in the team unless he's injured, because we're literally putting out at the moment Elliot, who's a child and is doing really well, but with some system issues involved, and Milner, who is literally pretty much old enough to be my dad. And I'm not as young as I was when I started doing these podcasts. So that's more of a scary sentence to say these days.
You're getting old, you're almost 21.
Hey, 23 now. I think I started doing a podcast when I was 17. So when I was 17, if I said Milner's old enough to be my dad, that's okay. He's just coming out of his prime. Now it's more concerning.
I think that's more worrying for Milner than you, to be fair.
Probably, yeah. You're probably right.
Dear. But no, I'm looking at the game. I can't remember which ones Milner started in exactly, but God, Bournemouth to make a difference. United's the clear one, because that was tragic that day.
United's the one, isn't it? That was painful. If you think how well Keita played at Old Trafford last season and before Paul Pogba went through his shin, he was absolutely fantastic. He scored the first goal. He was involved in the others. He was absolutely tearing them apart. And that United game, United weren't particularly good. We were just that bad, and it played completely into their tactics. And it reminded me actually of not so much the early United games under Klopp, because our issues in those games were that we just simply weren't brave enough. They'd be kind of tight, tense games, and they'd be drawn or they'd go one way or the other. it reminded me more of the Rodgers end of Rodgers era games against United. If you think the Juan Mata overhead kick game,
Yeah.
in 40th where it wasn't that we weren't brave, we weren't looking to play football, but we were just so unorganised that an all-organised team trying to play football is probably even a shade worse than an unorganised team just trying to park the bus, because we were trying to get on the ball, trying to play through midfield, but no one had any idea where they were meant to be. We were all over the place. And United, for all their sins, they've got talented players in attack. They've got fast players in attack. They'll punish you on the break and create chances. And Alisson can't save everything. And like you say, we only really got going in that game with about 15 minutes left. And that's just one of kind of countless games this season where we've dropped points. And there's definitely been mistakes in the defence, but the drop points, I think, have come as a direct result of the problems in midfield, because of then the knock-on effect they have further back in the team with your Trent, your Robertsons, whoever's playing centre-back as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. We'll stick with midfield. We'll come back to Trent because I think he's worth talking about. I don't know who to jump to next, because we kind of mentioned Thiago there. He's just too. we will harvest limbs for him. That's how important he is. It's just, it's just odd that we've planned our entire season, and maybe it's something you have to do when you've got a player as good as Thiago. But our entire system is basically Thiago dependent. I think if Naby was, let's say, available, we're not sure what's actually wrong with him, but he can stem the issues a bit because he's a better player than whoever else can play that left centre mid. But do you think it's just odd that our entire system is so dependent on a player who will play, oh God, 25 league games in a good season?
I think that this is one of the kind of signs of one of Klopp's very few flaws as a manager, in the sense that a couple of years ago, if we have Thiago playing, and we know, as we did, he's in our best team, he's in our best midfield, we look worse without him, but you've got a version of Jordan Henderson that is better than the 2022 version. You've got a version of James Milner that is better than the 2022 version, and so on. You've got a Wijnaldum in there still. You've got a Naby Keita in there that's actually able to play sometimes, as opposed to being banished to Azkaban like he has been this season. So a couple of years ago, we still look like a worse team without Thiago, but we've got the players that are coming in for him are at a higher level in their careers. They're playing better, so it doesn't look as bad. The team around's more functioning. Whereas this season, the problem is that we've lost one. We don't have Wijnaldum anymore. Keita's not been there at all. So we're more reliant on Thiago just to be fit, to be a body in the midfield, to get people on the pitch. But secondly, the drop off when he doesn't play is much worse. But again, we can't, this isn't like the defensive injury crisis of a couple of years ago, where you lose 3 centre backs for over 3 months each, just like that, where that's a freak incident that kind of happened, and it was one of those things. This is just poor planning from us, because you come into the season knowing that we're quite light on midfielders anyway, knowing that Thiago will have injury problems. It's not a might, he will, and that's absolutely fine, because he's a quality player. You accept that, and that's why we got him for the fee that we did. You accept that Keita will have injury problems, but not getting the bodies in early around them was just suicidal, because you know that you're going to have these problems, and therefore if they come early on in the season when you haven't managed to integrate kind of an Arthur, for example, it's going to bite you, and it has. But thankfully, Thiago's back now. He's looked like he hasn't missed a game. He's looked absolutely brilliant. Immediately comes back into team, probably looks like our best player, to be honest, elevates those around him like Suarez used to. But we know that hopefully we'll probably play another kind of 40, 50 games this season. He's not going to be able to play them all. We need to be putting in place, we need to be better at planning for when he's not going to be there, so that we can enjoy him a bit more and have him on the pitch, in kind of, games without worrying, we need to get him off because we're worried he's going to get injured. We want to be in a situation where we can use him as much as we can in the biggest games we can quite often, and then rest him out for the other times, because we know the drop-off is not going to be as big. Now, if Keita comes back into the fold, if Arthur gets fit and looks like the player that he did when he was back at Barcelona, we could end up in a pretty strong position for the rest of the season in midfield. But that's a very big if, and that might be the case, and brilliant, we have a great second half of the season after the World Cup. But if we're 15 points behind City by that point, then you know what? You're going to question, well, what's the point?
we can rest him for the Champions League games at least.
Wow,
if we get through.
Well, we'd still kind of play Henderson or Milner in the final and play awfully. So, no source allowed in the midfield in major finals. Clearly,
that's true. Oh, what if? What if, eh? Do you want to do Milner and Henderson, or do you want to do Elliott first?
I think let's do Elliott first, because I think he works when we're talking about. We've kind of touched on Milner and Henderson. We haven't spoken so much about Elliott in terms of the problems with the midfield. And I feel really sorry for Harvey Elliott at the moment, because I feel like he's gone from hero to zero amongst the fan base without really changing his performance levels. I think this season, Elliott's played well. He has looked good. He's looked similar to how he last season, really comfortable on the ball, really good at rotating play around with Trent and Salah. And I think what people have realised recently, myself included, I'm not a genius. This isn't something that I was kind of noticed in the first couple of games of the season, but a trend that people have noticed is that a big part of why we're struggling defensively probably comes from Elliott and his lack of kind of defensive nous and awareness. So this is nothing to do with his effort levels. I think his effort is absolutely fine. He's putting the work in as he should, and you'd expect him to. But understandably, again, bearing in mind he's played most of his football as a 10 or as a winger in the Championship, Blackburn, he just doesn't have that kind of defensive awareness that we're used to seeing with, say, a Wijnaldum, for instance, when Wijnaldum was playing as one of the eights, which is moving us to a position where it leaves Trent more exposed. I mean, Salah's got to be helping out more, almost even takes up some of Salah's space. So I don't think the problem with Elliott that people have been kind of having a go at him for is anything to do with his performances. I think his performances have been consistently good. It's just maybe we're starting to notice a trend that the way he's being used is a bit more disadvantageous to the rest of the team than we originally thought. That begs the question now. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on this. You can do one of a few things. You can take him out of the team and start trying to integrate someone else in that position, whether you bring Henderson back for enough games, try Arthur on that side, on the right, Curtis Jones comes back and has a go at it, move Thiago across. But you can take Elliott out of the team. You could move Elliott's position, although I think that gets a bit more questionable, because where do you move him? You're not going to replace Salah. You want to put him on the left wing. He's not going to play up front. Or, I think this is maybe the ideal option as opposed to taking out the team, but probably more unlikely, you could change system and move to more of a 4-4-2. But I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about that when we go on to what I assume we'll be talking about Darwin Núñez shortly. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on Elliott and what we should do with him and how he's been playing?
It really is an odd one, because I think he's certainly in the conversation for our player of the season, but as it's gone on, he is an issue, but you think, well, we don't want you to be an issue, so we won't be hard on you like we are with other players.
So player of the season and problem of the season at the same time.
Exactly. So it's just it's an odd one, because if Thiago was fit for all these games, this wouldn't be maybe the odd goal where you look, the right hand side, Trent's playing striker like he does for some reason. Some games. Moore's track back. He was box to box last time, or he wasn't asked to track back in recent years. And Elliott is a winger, so he's learning on the job, which is fine. But the majority of time, our midfield has been Milner or Henderson in the left centre mid role. I mean, whatever you think about Henderson, whether you're his biggest fan or Dave and hate him,
it's painful watching him on the left.
Yes.
It's very painful.
Just that lad has never played that side, and you can tell in every little movement he does and every big mistake he does in that role. He just doesn't do the angles, doesn't do the position. So I can't blame him for that. But what we saw in the Ajax game, and that was probably one of Harvey Elliott's quieter games, to be fair, was just control with him there. I know that their goal came from the right-hand side, but Trent in the second half looked so much more defensively aware.
Looks great, didn't he?
Yeah,
fantastic.
Exactly. So I think as long as we've got Thiago there and asterisk Naby, or maybe Arthur. I might ask you about Arthur if you ever actually seen him, because I forgot he existed since he's gone to Juve. But I think as long as one of the good left centre mids, and I will say good left centre mids, is there, I think it's not that big an issue. Although I do agree, if we're going to aim to win the league, which might be a bit too far gone now, but might not be. But if we want to go on a massive run, I think we may have to tinker his role. Maybe not the formation, but maybe tinker his role and take out the defensive responsibilities, because it's not for a want of trying. I think he's just got to learn that.
Yeah, but it's just not in his skill set.
Exactly.
It might well be one day, but right now it's just not there for him. Exactly. It's not his fault, but we can't be saying, oh, it's okay. I know it's not his fault, so we'll just leave him there. But if we want to win things, we've got to try and action
it. If our aim was to get 85 points and that could win us the league, everyone would be like, yeah, crack on. He's learning. See what happens. But maybe it'll be lower this season because both teams have started quite inconsistently. But we have to get 95 points to be in the conversation to win the league.
Well, if you look at Man City when they brought through Phil Foden, he played a lot of his football as one of the eights, and that's because they were so much better than everyone else, weren't really having problems in other areas of the pitch, didn't have these injury issues, and they could afford to have a Foden playing as one of the eights because they were winning 4-0 every week. So if they have a little bit of a defensive lapse, lose 4-1, 4-2, it's not the end of the world. Now what you see with City is in the biggest games, Foden does not play as the eight ever. Guardiola doesn't trust him there. Plays on the wing, whether it's right or left.
He gave Jack Grealish one game as an 8 and just went, no, that's not for me, mate.
No, not a chance.
Not for me, mate.
It almost goes back to when we used to try and play Coutinho as an 8 at Liverpool, and all the fans were clamoring for it, and Klopp just sort of did it a few times and was like, no, not too keen on that. You can be one of the front three.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really good point, and one that I hadn't massively considered, but now I hear it, I do definitely agree with that. Elliot did look better against Ajax, Trent looked better, and the clear sort of change there is that there's not only a more agile left centre midfielder in Thiago, but also, like you say, someone that can control the game more, that will help us control the possession, which means a little bit less chaos, a little bit less risk of getting countered after dodgy touches by Henderson or Milner when they miscontrol the ball. So yeah, I think there's an argument there that you can almost get away with Elliot as the right centre mid and add to that and give him the chance to develop and get good minutes there if you've got the left centre mid of Thiago, asterisk Naby, and maybe even Arthur, once he gets up and running. But like you say, there's a lot of caveats to that in the sense that you're still not completely fixing the problem by having Elliot out there. And it's the case of Thiago's not always going to be fit. We've got no idea what's going on with Naby and Arthur. We'll see what happens. You just kind of got to let him get fit and then see how he does. But yeah, he does look better with the right left centre mid there, and maybe as the season starts to progress, it's just something that he'll grow into. But for now, yeah, it's a problem. It's not his fault. It's just he's been asked to play there. He's doing the best job he can. He brings some great stuff to that position. But I think thinking back to last season when he played there for a stretch of a few games, we didn't look like we do now.
Yeah.
We looked much better than we do now, and he was playing in the same position. It was the same kind of role. Obviously, we were playing a different front three, but you can look at that and think, right, well, whilst Elliot is the 8, might not be perfect, might not have these flaws, it's definitely not the sole reason that Liverpool have been losing games, drawing games, because it worked for them there last season for a few games really nicely.
And you asked there what the other options then, would you either drop him and bring in a Henderson or something like that? Bluntly, I think our best midfield is Naby, Thiago, Firmino. I think that is, but we can't play that because we need, if Naby is to play for the team again, for the club again, I think we need them to rotate to have any sort of success, unless Arthur is better than most people think.
Agreed.
But Elliot can improve in that position, whereas Henderson can't. I think he's personally done in that position. I think he can still be a really good rotational 6. But as a top-level starter, I don't think Henderson's been good as an 8. Let me reword that. I don't think Henderson's been good as an 8 since we reworked the midfield into Thiago basically controlling the game, doing Ginny's job but being much more effective on the ball. And then the right-sided centre-mid plays right wing, plays as a 10, plays as a right centre-mid at the same time. I don't think Henderson's been good in that role since that change. I think he was effective when the right centre-mid role was basically... It wasn't Ginny on the opposite side. It was just basically he helped cover Trent and was a bit more box to box.
Yeah.
But now it's so much more that I don't think he can do that. Unless we tinker with that, I don't think Henderson can do that role. Whereas I think Elliott has the attacking skill set to do that, and I think it's easier to teach him how to press and defend better than watching Henderson struggle to do that at, I think he's 31-year-old now. So I would soldier. I'd play Curtis Jones in that role before Henderson, and I don't particularly rate Curtis Jones that much. I think he's better suited to that role than the left side. I don't want to be kind of pigeonhole him into, but I just don't think Henderson can do that role. So I'd soldier if Naby is done and we need them to, as I say, I'd just soldier on with Elliott. I'd have Jones as his backup. I'd have Henderson as Fabinho's backup. I'd have Thiago as the left, Arthur/Naby as backup. And if we have sufficient break, maybe tinker with NFT midfield, which I hate that cringy name for it, but it's just, I think that's how it'll set out. I think we've got to play the two young lads in midfield, unless we tinker and play a 4-2-3-1 as you said. Then maybe you can bring Carvalho into this conversation. But the Everton game, he wasn't a midfielder, was he? Bless him.
That was bold from Klopp, wasn't it? We haven't really talked about Carvalho yet. Maybe it's a good time to get onto him now. You mentioned it because that was one of the most surprising team selections I've ever seen from Klopp when he went with Fabinho and then Elliott and Carvalho as 2/8s. And again, like you look at it and say, well, Carvalho's looked really good off the bench. He's looked really lively. He deserved it. But yeah, that was surprising. Unsurprisingly, we looked really open on the counter attack, and probably we could have won that day, but just as easily could have lost.
I would have bet my house on Milner playing that game.
Yeah, I can't believe how that game was goalless. I've absolutely no idea. But no, I think you're right. Henderson's done as a top level 8. I mean, there's an argument to say that Henderson really have been a top level 8 apart from 13-14. And maybe even a stretch in 18-19 when we were in the Champions League. You'd go back and think the Southampton goal off the bench, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But he was still effective as an 8. Though.
Yeah, it was. He functioned in the system there a couple of years ago. Whereas I agree now he doesn't. I think he will bring more to the defensive side of the game than Elliott, purely because I just think positionally he won't charge forward as much. But then again, you do watch him sometimes and think, what are you doing charging forward there, moving transfer? So I think it's not even the strength of Henderson. And that's why I think overall, minus the system change, which we'll talk through maybe in a little bit when we talk about Nunes and talk through the attackers. I think if you're going to keep playing the 4-3-3, then I think Elliott and what he brings going forward and the long term of what he's going to gain from playing there is a better trade-off than going to a Henderson or a Milner. And obviously that is all caveated by if we start to get Thiago's, Keita's, Arthur's fit and playing well, then maybe you look at it again. But when you look at what we've had so far this season, as much as I've kind of, slated Klopp for some of his decisions and the fact that he should have signed more midfielders anyway, bear in mind what he's had to work with, putting that aside, I think he's probably made the right decision to keep Elliott and give him the chance. Because if we're going to, not be perfect and drop points, then we may as well not be perfect with a team that is developing and showing potential for the future, as opposed to not being perfect with, Henderson or Milner. Because if you put Henderson or Milner into the team for Elliott for those games this season, which you couldn't because Milner's played alongside Elliott half the time, but hypothetically, our problems don't go away. If anything, we probably maybe slightly better defensively, but a much more blunted in attack. So, we've kind of, you'd have to pick the best of the bad bunch so far, I think.
I was going to move on to Trent, but we'll move on to Moore. And I think he kind of links in with Elliott. I think this again changed in the Ajax game, which I think this is why a lot of people, myself included, think it might be a turning point. Do you think having two left-footed inverted people is just kind of muddling it a bit? Because that could be another argument for people who want Henderson back in the team or whoever back in that right side of the team. But I think the Ajax game, we flipped it about and Moore played a bit more narrow, and that's why he wasn't diabolically terrible. But what have you made of Moore basically holding hands with the assistant ref most of the season?
It's been strange to watch, hasn't it? I really enjoyed you using two inverted left footers on that. Was a good phrase. That was a good phrase. Someone been playing Football Manager all day. Two inverted left footers on the right hand side. Again, and I hate to keep going back to midfield, but I think this is a knock-on effect, and the reason for that is because of Elliott's. Yeah, if you think about Mo and how it always works really nicely in the sense of Mo's always kind of cut in and almost joined as a second striker at times. that's because the right side of the fielder for us typically is to be able to shift across, almost play the right back or the right winger at times, depending on where Trent is. If you think of, say, Oxlade-Chamberlain versus Atletico Madrid, the classic example, basically he was playing right centre mid that night, but basically ends up playing as a right winger. The reason that that's always worked really well, and that's given Mo the licence to go in as a central striker, is because if you kind of close your eyes and think about our players as dots on the pitch, the central midfielders will naturally come across, because you've been able to have Henderson and Fabinho come across and play as a two together. Not so much Henderson anymore, but he used to be able to do it. You've had Henderson and Wijnaldum be able to come across and almost form a two-man midfield. You'd have Fabinho and Thiago now, who are great at it, coming across and forming a two-man midfield. So it almost allows us to be really fluid in the game, in the sense of you can have Mo coming in, because that will allow your Elliott to go out wide, and that will allow Fabinho to come across, and then say Thiago come across or Keita come across, because Fabinho, Thiago and Keita are already comfortable in midfield too. You'll see if we get counter-attacked that, that they're absolutely fine to handle that, because they've got the legs, they've got the positional awareness. This season, because we've been playing Henderson left centre mid, a position that he's not good in, we've played Carvalho left centre mid against Everton. We've played Milner left centre mid on numerous occasions. The problems that has is that none of those three can tuck in and form a two-man midfield if we have our right centre mids, the right side of it, going across to the right hand side to allow Salah to come in. So I think that's why Salah has been much more kind of isolated, hugging the touchline, playing that role, because I think he's been instructed to by Klopp, because we don't have the confidence that if he goes in and starts playing as almost the second number 9, I think the team shape is just going to look atrocious, because Elliott's going to be left covering too much space, and we aren't able to move the midfield across as much as we would if we had a Wijnaldum or a Thiago playing. So hopefully, again, not necessarily now Thiago's back and will solve all our problems, that will become less of an issue. And like we did against Ajax, when Mo had a really good game, we'll start to see him inside more. So I do think it's something that's being done on purpose and for a reason. Whether that is kind of having an overall positive, I guess, it's difficult to say, because we just simply haven't got a comparison of what it's like when Mo tries and does his normal thing with a Milner or a Carvalho or a Henderson left centre mid. But I understand why Klopp's doing it. I still think he looks a great player out on the wing. Some of his passes and the chances he's created this season have been tremendous. Some of his defensive work's been really good. I think it was only one of the last recent games we've had where we saw him and Elliott sprinting back. I think it might have been the Ajax game, actually.
Yeah, it was.
So by no means do I think Salah's played poorly. Do I think he's not trying? I just think that his numbers are a bit lower because, like you say, he's been forced into a more natural average position. And I don't think that Klopp's just suddenly decided to try and turn him into a left-footed right version of Aaron Lennon on the wrong side of the pitch. I think it is just the case that the way the team's been balanced has forced him to play that, holding the lines in his hand role, where he can be a bit closer to Elliott and to Trent to kind of help cover those spaces where Elliott maybe isn't as positionally switched on and able to. Like you say, is that a problem for Elliott? Well, like to an extent, but as we've mentioned, if you can get, your Fabinho and Thiago midfield sorted, then that solves a lot of that problem, because they'll naturally be able to kind of come across and cover much better than a Milner or a Henderson can.
Yeah, I think we just may have to switch it a bit. I think, obviously, Elliott, for the most part of the season's kind of taken up the central roles, and I think if we put Mo in them roles, I think it'll just up our danger factor. Christ, what the hell am I saying? Our threat.
Danger factor.
Danger factor. Sounds like a
film you'd see. It sounds like a terrible fit, like a Channel 4, 11 o'clock on a Sunday night film.
God, remember that? No, you're too young. Fear Factor. People my age will remember that show.
I've heard of it.
Joe Rogan used to host it. It was brilliant. It was amazingly terrible television. Yeah, I think it'll improve our threat going forward if we just put more in more central areas rather than the wide ones. But yeah, I think defensively, again, it'll improve with the good midfielders being there. But we'll finish up with the last of the right hand side. I mean Trent. I think some of it's been indefensible, which is funny because Trent can't defend. But yeah, I think some of the Napoli game was indefensible, as was a few other people's performances. But even in some of our better games, some of it looks lazy, and I don't think we've ever been. I don't think we can be able to accuse any of our players of being lazy. But I don't know if it was fatigue or whatever, or just giving up in the game. and just having a feeling we were getting smashed that day or something. But Trent, you can forgive the occasional defensive lapse where, take the first game, getting destroyed by Mitrovic in the air, people were slating him like, what do you want him to do? Mitrovic is a monster. But the Napoli game where you watch him literally park up and have a seat watching Joe Gomez get bullied, is like, mate, come on. You can have a defensive lap, but being lazy is a different thing. But I think almost the more worrying thing is the attacking output isn't compensating that where it can and should. But I think the attacking output's gone downwards, and the defensive performance has gone downwards as well.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You forgive Trent for being beaten at the back post by Mitrovic because most fullbacks would. You can forgive him for having a tough time against, Marcus Rashford of the world when United are on the counter attack and the midfield's terrible. Because if I was a right back and again with a terrible midfield and I was having one of the fastest players in the league running at me, I'd probably struggle as well. But for the instances of laziness, for the Napoli game, it's just standing around ball watching. That is just shocking. And again, our problem comes back to Calvin Ramsey, signed a good young right back. He's been injured. We can't stick Trent in the stand for a game. For say, Bournemouth at home would have been a great chance to take him out off the back of some of those performances. And then the problem therein lies that is it fatigue because he's had to play so many games? Is it complacency because he's the only one that's been playing right back? And I know we play Gomez there occasionally, but it's very different. It forces us to change the way we play. Is it a mixture of both? Probably. But either way, it doesn't make it acceptable. He's been poor and needs to sort it out. And like we mentioned earlier, the second half against Ajax, he looked really good. So maybe it's the case that, having the likes of Thiago back in the team gave him a bit of a boost. Things started coming to him a bit easier. If so, that's fantastic. And I look forward to seeing him return to his world-class, best fullback in the world self over the rest of the season. But that doesn't excuse laziness. You can excuse poor performances, you can excuse off days. You can't excuse not trying, and that's what it looked like against Napoli, for example, when he's just watching the ball being passed around him. So what you're hoping is that this is a moment in his career that he's not really had yet, and Klopp, being the great manager that he is, the perfect manager to kind of have him turn that around, to get in his ear and be able to sort it. And he'll have senior figures around the squad, your Hendersons, your Milners, your Van Dijks, your Salahs, that are picking him up on things and forcing him to work harder. If I'm Mo Salah and I've just decided, what, I'm going to stay, I'm signing a massive contract, and I'm looking back down the line at Trent just not really giving a so-and-so and not really trying, I'm going to be, pissed off, and I'm going to be in his ear. So I think there's enough of signs there with this players he's got around him, the talent he obviously has, the level he can play to, and the fact that the squad should hopefully be getting a bit better now we've got players returning from injuries. There's enough there that he can literally turn it around. We might come back from the international break and he's absolutely fantastic again, but you can't come out and defend him for some of the performances this season because some of them just have looked lazy, which is difficult because Liverpool fans are used to defending Trent because he gets a load of rubbish in the press, gets a load of rubbish on other fans that he can't defend this and that. He can defend, he's a decent defender, and he's a world-class attacker, but this season he's been an average attacker and a pretty terrible defender. And there's only so long you can defend it for before you just start saying he needs to sort it out, or we need to try and look at putting him in the stands for a couple of games and trying to get Ramsey fit and give him a chance. Not as the long term. Not saying we take Trent out of the team forever, but he doesn't even have the threat at the moment of 1 or 2 games on the bench because we need him to play. I think sometimes, especially for a young player, you need to have that threat there just to keep them on their toes and keep that complacency away.
Yeah, we do need a right-footed Tsimikas, but that's been an issue for so long. As we're all
the way Tsimikas is going, we'll be saying we need a right foot Robertson when Tsimikas displaces Robertson from the team. But
that's true. I think it might be how Robertson. I think it might be more how Robertson's going rather than Tsimikas is going. But that's for another time. Let's get into the attack then, because you've mentioned it a few times. Right? We'll do Luis Diaz quickly because he's the positive one. It's an odd one because I think everyone talks about replacing Mane and thinking it's Darwin.
Yeah, I've done it.
I think it's Diaz. I don't think he's, and I didn't expect him to be. I don't think he's close to being peak Mane levels. But you look at him, and I think he is 2016-17 Mane. I think he's just, we're waiting for, well, basically the team to sort itself out, and I think you can see that jump that Mane took in 18-19 and 19-20, where he probably became certainly our best attacker in that period, I think, because Moore was clearly the best one in 17-18. 18-19 was kind of even, then 19-20 when we won the league, Mane just went Super Saiyan. I think we can see that same jump, but I think he's still really in that 16-17 Mane mould. But I think that jump will come this season.
He's a little bit still raw, isn't he?
Yes.
He's just lacking a little bit of that killer instinct. It always makes me laugh just on the whole Mane Salah debate, and they're both both amazing players. You try not to compare them too much, but I'm very much of the Salah's for the better opinion, because Mane's best season for Liverpool was that 18-19 when his numbers just matched Salah's purely.
Yes.
So Mane's best season was just matching Salah. But Diaz is absolutely fantastic. And I think the narrative around Liverpool's attack and how certain individuals have been perceived would be much different if we had paid the Núñez 60 million for Diaz and say the 35-40 million that we paid for Diaz for Núñez. I think if you swap those price tags around, it looks a lot more. It looks like it makes a lot more sense. But Diaz has been really good. I think the thing I like about him is that, like you say, he's got that kind of 16-17 Mane vibe about him. He's got brilliant coming on that right foot scoring. He'll work stupidly hard. The final ball, that kind of thing, isn't always there, but it's coming. He can get better. And I also like, and this is what I mentioned earlier in terms of shape, if you at some point in this season say, what we're going to do is move to more of kind of like a 4-4-2, where you've got Fabinho and Thiago playing central midfield. You're having, say Elliott just going to play as more of a pure right midfielder, or maybe even you put Keita there or something like that, or move Trent forwards and play Gomez as right back. And if you want to stick Salah and Núñez up front in more of the two, I think Diaz, if you want him to, can play as more of that conventional winger. But equally, the great option is that he also looks absolutely brilliant as a more of a goal scoring winger at a 4-3-3. I just think that, as we can all see, that final product gets a bit better. He can go supernova in the next couple of years. He could be the new Mane. If Salah slows down in the next few years and does take on more of this creator role, isn't in the box as much, and then maybe that works, and Salah ends up being this brilliant holding hands with the assistant referee player, always on the touchline, creating chances. And Núñez is the one in the box. It's just at the moment he's very, very good without quite being of that level where you can bank on him scoring pretty much every game. But the thing is, though, I don't think he was bought to do that, especially if we had in mind that Mane was going to be leaving and we're going to be getting Núñez in. Obviously, don't get me wrong, you always want your front three to all be scoring loads of goals. But if you think back to Mane, Firmino, Salah, the reason that worked so well was because you had one of them in Firmino that did more of the selfish job for the team, that wasn't on the end of the final ball so much, so that Mane and Salah could break into the box at a rate of knots. If you look at Salah, Núñez and Diaz, it makes more sense for Diaz to be more of that typical winger, doing more of that selfish role, maybe even getting stuck into the midfield, at times the middle foot out of the ball, and then have Salah and Núñez going forward and being the ones that are more in the box, the more selfish side, and then the chances. We just haven't really had a chance to see it yet, though, have we? Because Núñez has been suspended at times, then kind of been in and out of the team with problems. So we just haven't had the chance to see what that looks like as a three generally, let alone with a functioning team behind it. And I'm interested to see, once we do hopefully have, the NFT midfield, as you put it, or even just Fabinho, Thiago, Elliott, how Diaz, Núñez and Salah start to work and start to build relationships as a three when Salah isn't having to hold the hands of those behind him as much, when Diaz starts to kick on a bit and obviously wants Núñez gets a run into him. And that's before you even count Diogo Jota. I mean, I'd be feeling pretty bummed if I was Jota, having done the fantastic work that he's done for Liverpool so far in his career with us, and then having us go out and buy, a £60 million striker to go and play this position. Obviously Jota's, very versatile. He can play different positions. You could even go to that 4-4-2 I mentioned, and have Jota as your right side midfielder. He'd probably do a decent job for you. But I think it's a shame for him that he's almost of that kind of, if you think, Pedro at Barcelona about a decade ago, that kind of level where he's definitely good enough to start in the front three for a very good team, but he's that kind of player that for an elite team, he's the first off the bench as opposed to kind of the last on the pitch.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's a shame. It's a weird one, because I think when we signed Jota, I wasn't really that much of a fan because at Wolves he seemed like a very patchy. He was a young player as well, so you kind of expect that. But he was very patchy, and I think we have seen that a bit at Liverpool because the start of last season he was fantastic. Then similarly with Moore after the January break, and I think he may have got injured or something like that, and we rushed him back for the League Cup, didn't we? Or something like that, and he just never looked the same afterwards. But I think if he had the full pre-season, didn't get the injury, thanks Portugal for playing an injured player and all that jazz, I think he would have started the season and we would have had a very familiar front three because, let's be honest, we haven't really talked about Bobby, but Bobby's had a really good run at times, but he's still not what he was.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the physical capability to have the impact that he did against the top teams.
Yeah. It's just
but
the link play is not
technically
the
brilliant.
same.
Yeah. Like against it was brilliant against Bournemouth because he could just
he's not a championship player.
He could just vibe. He was just there vibing, chilling, nice little passes on the end of things. But yeah, I think we can't rely on him consistently, but that's fine because he's at the age now where I think with him we use him properly. Where we've got water replacements for him. He probably knows what his role is. It's just a shame that Klopp can't have that kind of ruthless streak over the rest of the pitch because it's kind of surprising how much he loves Firmino. Yeah, he's happy to move Firmino to a bench role, have him as a bit part player to buy big names as his replacement because Jota's and Nunez is coming in. Whereas in the midfield, it's like, well, Henderson, Milner, we'll roll you out as much as we can. It's just kind of a bit of a weird one given the perception it has around kind of Klopp and Firmino. It shows that Klopp can be ruthless when he wants to be with his favourites because Firmino is definitely one of his favourites.
We've actually planned out the forward line so well, like it worked out perfectly. Like maybe Darwin isn't the best fit in terms of replacing Mane/Bobby because Mane was the striker by the end of last season. But as I said, I think we both agree Diaz is the replacement for Mane. And
exactly.
But the timing was perfect. We had Jota as like the middle one who filled in, and then Darwin can be the long term up, probably level up into if he reaches his potential, he will go on to another level.
That's the thing, with Darwin, it's easy to forget because we paid so much money for him, but he's only just turned 23.
Yeah.
He's a really young player, especially for a striker. If you look at the likes of Jamie Vardy, for example. He hit his peak, in his late 20s, early 30s. I think Haaland's obviously a big exception, but a lot of strikers these days do start to hit their peak later on in their career. Exactly. We've bought an actual, functioning human with emotions.
Well, even our lads. When did Moore and Mane peak? 26?
Well, Salah is what now? Sort of 30? So he'll have signed for us 2017. So he signed when he was 25. So he didn't peak till 26, 27, 28. Even in the last couple of years, you could say Salah's peaked. Strikers and players generally now peak later. Nunez could, for us, be a pretty good player for the next couple of years, but maybe not even be a nailed starter all the time. There might be times where Jota gets a run, where Firmino gets a run, where we play Salah as the striker and put someone out wide. And Nunez could then still, in 2 or 3 years, when he's 25, 26, turn into some sort of supernova, be one of the first names on the team sheet. And when Salah's aging a bit, Nunez becomes our main provider. I think because of the price tag and because of the performance of the team, there's a little bit of people are always going to demand things with the price tag, and you're not meant to buy potential. If you're paying that much for a 23-year-old, they've got to be good straight away. And there's definitely extent to that. But I think Liverpool fans kind of take a step back and think we don't need Nunez to come in, or we shouldn't at least. We shouldn't need Nunez to come in and be a 20, 25 goal player straight away because we've got Jota to come in and start up front of so we've got Firmino to come in. We should be able to bed him in naturally over time in a well-functioning team. It's just a shame for him that he's come in, done something stupid in his second game after a really great start, got sent off against Palace, and has then come back into a really disjointed fold where he probably hasn't had a chance to settle and start building relationships with players because Salah's not. He can't really build a relationship with Salah because Salah's not playing his normal game because he's playing with a different midfield behind him. Same with even Diaz compared to who he had behind him last season. He's not used to playing with Milner. He's not used to playing with the ghost of Andy Robertson. It's going to take time for them to build these relationships. And even after the international break, hopefully when we start to look more like our normal 11, and probably start to play Nunes a bit more, it'll still take him time again because Salah will then start hopefully playing differently because he's got a more functioning midfield behind him. Diaz might start playing differently with Thiago behind him as opposed to Milner. So it's all going to change, but I think there's enough there from Nunes in terms of quality that he can go on and be a really good player. He just needs to try and chill out a bit and do less donkey-like things. But some of the best footballers in the world do donkey-like things. It's okay to not be the most aesthetically pleasing player in the world as long as you score the goals and get the results. And I think people have just got to give him time. It's easy to write him off, a couple of months in because it's not been perfect so far. But if we did that, then we'd probably be writing off a lot of players. Fabinho wasn't great in his first couple of months. Klopp didn't play him that much. Robertson was benched by Alberto Moreno. Yes, I need to get a mention because Moreno was in great form for that couple of months after Robertson signed. So it's going to take time, but I think the attack. I think you put it perfectly. The long-term planning for the attack has been pretty good. Has been what we'd expect more in terms of Liverpool's recruitment. So I'm not as worried about it as I'm in midfield.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Darwin is the money paid. I know people say it's €1 billion or whatever, when in fact it's 67, and then it goes to 85 if he actually does well, which means he's justified his price tag.
67 at the moment.
Yeah, it's still a lot of money, and I think it's our second highest, I believe, after Van Dijk. But
it's around the Alisson fee, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's because it's Liverpool, and we've obviously. I'll use excuse for want of a better phrase, but to be honest, it's just the reality. It's not an excuse. We can't spend the money. Never mind Man City. We can't spend. Well, we probably could, but we don't spend the money of even a Chelsea, even a bloody Arsenal in recent years.
Yeah, even Everton to an extent.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Or Aston Villa. Give us their budget, we'd be top of the league by miles.
Absolutely. So when we spend big on a player, and at that time we didn't really bring any money in. I think by the end of the window we were spent $5 million or something. So it always happens. FSG always get the yacht paint money back. So it's, I think, just the optics of it from everyone, not just non-Liverpool fans, but Liverpool fans as well. I think there is an expectation, but when you look in the reality of it, we've signed a young lad from the fifth tier league in the world, not tier.
Yeah, it depends how much you rate how much you rate the French league, I guess. But yeah,
and not naive, but I think it'd be un-Liverpool like if he came in and just went, you've replaced Mane and Bobby in one player straight away, and it's like,
yeah, when you look at the Klopp's track record for how he beds in signings, typically it would go against the grain a little bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and you think about all the players who we've signed and who actually came in straight away after we had an actual good team, because I think 16, 17, but Ginny and Mane, they were obviously going to come in straight away.
Yeah, and no.
But yeah, after 16, 17, who's came in straight away and went in the team straight away?
Well, if you go through the team, if you go through the team scratch from, Alisson came in straight away, but that's because we spent 70 million on a goalkeeper. Robertson didn't. Van Dijk did, because he again big money, but Kanate didn't. Even Matip didn't play all the time during his first season. Trent obviously came in because of Klein's injury. That's kind of a different story.
Well, he still rotated with Gomez for the first year.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Fabinho didn't. Diaz was in and out in this first season. Jota was in and out. So it's
weirdly Naby did. He did start straight away.
Naby came in. Well, they knew he was going to get injured at some point.
Yeah, just like
he's fit. We better hurry up and play him. But yeah, it's not. I think it's not a worry that for us that Nunes has come in and isn't suddenly first name on the team sheet, bagging as many goals as Haaland, because it's just not really the way we've ever done transfers. I think, especially, I appreciate for fans it's exciting when we spend this big money on players, and I get excited by it too. And we don't do it often, so it's nice. But I do think you're right. I think that leads to kind of a bigger level of scrutiny that's needed, especially when we live in a world where we know typically how Klopp will operate on transfers. And when we've got the likes of Jota, the likes of Firmino that can play in the same position that are damn good players, you don't always need the shiny new toy to, be ripped out of the packet and torn to shreds straight away. You can, give it the odd game off the bench, give it the odd start and integrate it. And yeah, I think the headbutt obviously caught obviously
Didn't help.
fault and didn't help the attention on him. But I think once we get back hopefully to our own normal ways, I think Nunes will start to kick on and typically just sort of have more of that shot in and out of the team a bit, but doing a decent job. Feel.
Yeah, it's a tough one with Darwin because I'm not sure what the right game is to bring him in. I mean, let's look at our fixtures. I am scrolling the wrong way. That'd probably help if I went downwards. So we got
scroll the wrong way. You'll look at the results.
Absolutely, bring back bad memory. But we play Brighton, new manager about Brighton, I should say, on the Saturday, October 1st. Then we play Rangers on Tuesday that week. Then Arsenal.
Is that at home or away?
That's at Anfield.
Okay, because Darwin Nunes at Ibrox just absolutely stinks for a red card.
It does really, doesn't it? Then Arsenal, as we said, I'm guessing that'll be a Sunday game if it's at 4:30. Rangers, that game. Then it's Man City. So I think for the Brighton game, we almost have to roll with what we played against Ajax. Maybe tinker the odd thing because we obviously played a bit more controlling in the second half. Maybe Rangers is the game for Darwin if we're at home because
Rangers at home because they are pretty poor.
Yes, and well, it's basically a championship team. Let's be fair.
And then maybe
they've just got a magical stadium.
Yeah. And maybe he gives Jota the run against Arsenal because he's got a pretty good record against them.
Or Bobby, yes.
And then maybe again you simply go Jota off me, and then maybe you bring Darwin back in against City because he had quite a lot. He gave him a lot of trouble in the Community Shield. He probably did a good job there as well.
And that's at Anfield as well.
But that's the thing, with Nunes, we've got the players where we can pick and choose the games. We can say, right, let's bring him in for that one, let's take him out for that, because we've got all the great players that can play the same position. With poor Arthur Melo, he needs to get fit and come in because we've got a granddad and a child playing midfield at the moment. Or Thiago, we can't have play 4 games in 10 days. One saving grace for us, I think, this season is the World Cup. Because if you look through our team, Salah and Diaz aren't going, and
Thiago probably won't go.
It's weird. It's weird, isn't it? Because he's not in the Spain squad, despite being fit. I guess. Listen, by no means am I an expert on the Spanish national team, but my only guess would be they've got a good group of centre midfielders. A lot of them are quite young ones.
I guess it's Pedri, Rodri. Is it Gavi? Gavi already played?
Maybe. God knows. But yeah. But I guess the thing with Thiago is that they probably wouldn't want to be like, right, Thiago's in our team, 2 weeks before the tournament, or Thiago's out for a month. That's probably where the thinking comes in, which is probably fair enough to them. But yeah, it's surprising that he's not in the team. You'd think he might make the squads, at least, as an option, but he's probably not going to play much football then. Salah's not going to play much football. Diaz isn't going to play much football. Fabinho doesn't always start for Brazil. Gomez isn't going to be there for England. It looks unlikely. I'm pretty sure that Matip doesn't play in this national football anyway, so he's going to get a break. Kanate might be with the France squad, but isn't going to play loads.
I don't think he will, to be honest, because I think the French manager's weird, isn't he? I think Kanate got his first call up, but I think, if I remember correctly, it was Fofana who was originally picked, but
you got Saliba in there as well.
Yeah,
I think Trent, who won't play much.
Like yeah, Trent. I don't think Trent will go.
Scotland going?
No,
Scotland lost
Neither
didn't they? And Ukraine. So, we're going to come back in January with a lot of players that have almost had a chance to have the pre-season. Yeah. So if we can just stay in the title race, and by that I mean to probably stay within 5 points of City, so match them from now until the World Cup, then who knows in the second half of the season? We could be great in the Champions League again. But I think, like I was saying earlier, the worry for me is that we've dropped points in games we should be winning. We're about to play, like you said there, we're about to play Brighton, Arsenal and City, who have probably been 3 of the best 5 teams so far in the league this season. And that's what's scary, because we could, very easily play really well against Brighton, against Arsenal and City, and very easily drop, 2, 3, 4 points in those games. But that's just the nature of the league at the moment. I think the quality in terms of, like, Arsenal and Spurs are better than they've been. The quality of the table, like even the individual quality, like West Ham have just signed Paqueta, Newcastle just signed Alexander Isaac. He looked great at Anfield. It's crazy now how sort of stacked the mid-table is in terms of some of the players, like some of the non-top 6.
Even United have got better.
Even United have got better. They were coming from a pretty low bar. but equally, that makes our lives harder, but it makes it harder for City as well. It makes it harder for Chelsea, the other teams that want to win the title. And if Haaland gets injured and hurts his knee for a few weeks, which he's got a tendency to do, maybe even City end up getting pegged back a little bit. So whilst, I know the mood of our chat today has been quite, this is going wrong, that's going wrong, we should have this better downbeat. It's still early days and there's still a lot to play for. We won 2 trophies last season, we could have won 4. There's no reason why we can't go and win another couple this season. We just need to fix some things and just be a bit more wise in our decision making.
Well, that's the thing. I think I was just double checking. Norway aren't at the World Cup, but Belgium are. And for all the love Haaland's getting, and much deserved love, let's be fair, that bloke is not human. De Bruyne's still the key for me. Yeah, he's the difference between Liverpool.
Can you imagine him in the Liverpool team as the right side of 8?
No, because could you imagine the amount of players that the opposing team would put to mark Trent, KDB, and more. The left side would just be like the right back on it. Just
be a ghost town.
Yeah, it'd be mental. But yeah, Belgium, to be fair, have quite a tough group as well. So I'm guessing De Bruyne will have to play most games because they've got Canada, who I think they came
not first a terrible team.
Yeah, they came first or second in the North or the North or Central America, whatever the hell it is. Qualifying Morocco.
CONCACAF.
Yes, that's the one. Morocco, who I think are growing quite well as an AFCON team. Obviously got Hakimi and stuff like that. And Croatia are always a pain in the ass for everyone to play.
So he's going to have to play all 3 of those.
He'll have to play all of them. I'm not sure how it works, but if it works out how this, I'm not sure it is, but if they're playing Group E, which if it does work like that, they'll probably have to play Spain or Germany. And it might not work like that, but if it does, that's a tough game. But and this is probably Belgium's last chance of winning something. So there'll be a lot of pressure on him. Who else is key for City? The England lads, I don't think
Diaz will be playing Portugal.
What's Portugal's group? Ghana, Uruguay, that's a tough one. Ghana, Uruguay, South Korea. So
Walker will be playing for England as well.
And England, to be fair,
Walker's really key.
If England don't get to the semi-final, it's a failure. Let's be fair. So that'll be Foden, Walker, Grealish, and who gives the toss?
Stones probably.
Stones, right.
Yeah.
Holland, Ake
will be playing for Holland and Van Dijk.
Cancelo for Portugal as well.
The World Cup could change a lot. You don't wish injury on players, but if we're predicting, some teams are going to get lucky at the World Cup and not get players injured. Some teams are going to have horrendous luck, and it's just the point of I'm not saying I wish all City's players would get injured, but if that scenario does occur, we need to use your favourite say. If that scenario does, we need to be able to take advantage of it, and that's why I think if we can stay 4 or 5 points off them until the World Cup comes, then anything to play for, because we tend to be able to put really good runs together in the second half of the season.
Well, that's the thing. If Thiago's fit for when we play them, I'm touching all the wood in my room, all of it. If he's fit for that game and we figure out defending and laziness and stuff like that, I think we can beat City, because it is at Anfield. When we actually have like centre backs and stuff, I don't think they've beat us at Anfield. I might be wrong in that, but we have a good record against them at Anfield, whether it's drawing or losing. But if we,
I don't think we've lost them at Anfield under Klopp, apart from the behind closed doors, no centre back
season. Yeah. So if we win that game, as long as we don't like screw up massively in between that, it'll be close, or it might even be even. So yeah, I think a lot of the season's optimism may be answered like 4 games after the international break, which is an interesting one. But Ollie, we have gone about an hour now, I think. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wind down?
I know our short and sharp podcast has done well, hasn't it? Going the full hour.
It is.
No, I think we've covered everything. I think we've gone through the squad nicely. The only shout out I will give to James Milner, is something we've discussed recently, is that he's given a lot of criticism. It's not his fault, it's just ageing. It happens to the best of us. But in his ageing, what a fantastic beard he's grown.
This is what Yorkshire tea and Ribena does for your face.
I need to get down to Tesco then and get some in over now because it's a magnificent beard. The real sculpture of a man Milner looks now. And
if he grew
honestly,
that when he was at Leeds, he would have been playing for Real Madrid for 20 plus years by now.
do you want to hear something crazy? I saw Jamie Milner has played 298 games for Liverpool. That feels crazy.
If Brendan Rodgers stuck around, that would be in the top 5. That'd be like 500 by now. We'd probably be in the relegation scrap.
He'd have arranged friendlies just to and you play more games when you're in the Europa League, so you've got to take that into consideration as well. Well, the way Leicester are going.
Oh, that's true.
Poor Brendan Rodgers.
Do you want to have a quick look at the rest of the league? I mean, we mentioned City there, but
let's have a quick shoot through. Let's have a quick shoot through and
Chelsea.
And do some hot takes. Chelsea.
Graham Potter, year on air.
Lovely guy, terrible culture fit. Can't see it going well, especially with what appears to be just, I can't think of a better word than nutcase of an owner. Seems to be an absolute crazy bloke. Absolutely admire his commitment to bringing, essentially the Barclays back to the league. Definitely needed. But yeah, I understand why Potter's gone there because it's not easy as an English coach to get a chance at such a big club. But my God, does that look like it could be a disaster, especially if he doesn't get all the senior players on side. That could be a toxic environment. The rumour is, and again, talking rumours, the rumour is that a big part of the fallout was that Tuchel didn't want to sign Ronaldo, and that Ronaldo's potentially on his way in January. Ronaldo in a Graham Potter system? What?
I was going to say that's probably a worse fit than a Tuchel system.
I couldn't think of a worse fit in the league. I think even Klopp and Guardiola had managed to do something.
They figured it out. That bloke had literally employed Danny Welbeck to run around.
Yeah.
That was it.
So, Graham Potter, the manager, yay. The fit, nay. I'll come back with one at you. Are Arsenal back?
Kinda. I think Topper's a back 14, but
I think
not
back
as
being
not
top
as a
four
league.
bottlers.
Yeah.
No.
I think they'll get top 4 this year. I don't think they'll maintain the title. I think Spurs can maintain the title. I think Spurs are like a slightly better positioned version of us. I think they're not playing well, so I think they can improve, but I don't think they'll maintain levels of what City will do and what we can do.
If Conte stays and doesn't have his yearly fallout and go back to Juventus, which is what I've seen today, not that he's fallen out with anyone, just that they're looking to potentially get rid of Allegri and he could be back in. So there's one.
It wouldn't surprise me if Potter ends up at Tottenham by this time.
Well,
I
thought that would make a lot of sense. But maybe Pochettino back? Could they get Zidane? Who knows? Are Leicester going down? Who's the next? I'll give you one. Who's the next manager to be sacked?
I mean, the easy answer is Rodgers, but they seemingly can't afford to sack him because, well, it's Wednesday after the international break. Why haven't they sacked him?
That's the thing. If they're going to sack him, surely now is the opportune time. You've got the international break. They've got a really good run of fixtures coming up because I'm about to put James Maddison in my fantasy team.
Good man.
Gerrard?
They
put a couple of results together. They did just
win,
but they don't look great.
They look awful, don't they?
Michael Beale left in the summer, didn't he? Did he go? I can't remember. He went back to. He managed. He manages QPR, doesn't he? Somewhere.
Yeah, it's QPR, I think.
And it was kind of muted in terms of the way Gerrard's team worked. Gerrard's very much the motivator, the man manager on the touchline, whereas Beale is much more the tactical kind of technical build-up play, defensive shape side. And I think you can tell that by watching Villa because they look like a team of really good players that've got no idea what they're meant to be doing or how they're meant to kind of construct any moves. So potentially Gerrard, but Hasenhüttl maybe. Southampton are quite. You could see he would wake up one day and he's gone because Southampton are quite rogue.
Steve Cooper, Nottingham Forest owner's a bit mad. Steve Cooper wouldn't surprise me.
He's going to want to see a return on that investment. I mean, the thing is, the Everton fans love Lampard.
Yeah, I thought.
Is that kind of some way of Stockholm syndrome?
Kind of, because the dreadful. I know they beat West Ham, but it was one of the worst games of football I've ever seen. But all they do is try and draw 0-0.
It was awful, and they weren't in that bad a position when they took over last season. His greatest achievement was dragging them into a relegation battle to then get them out to win some acclaim off the fans. they've spent some more money in the summer and then look awful again this season. But the fan seems to like him. They probably won't get relegated. So see, West Ham have been poor.
I don't think Moyes will get sacked, but yeah.
They've only played about 2 Europa League games so far, so they can't even really use that excuse yet.
I think Moyes is he's just stuck to his guns, hasn't he? I think he's found his Sylvan Distan and Phil Jagielka in Craig Dawson in one player. I think you need to I know they tried with signing Agard or something from Nice or Rennes, which one everyone.
Yeah, they've got Kara in from France as well, Tilo Kara.
Yeah, I think they just need to kind of rejuvenate. I think you need to. Well, Jared Bowen looks awful. I think that's why I think that's why people went and said, let's spend 80 mil on Jared Bowen. A few people were like, no.
Good thing we didn't do that.
Yeah, I think they just need to roll with Skamaka, Bowen, Paqueta. I like Fornals.
I like Fornals. I think Fornals, I call him the chaos player.
Yes.
You never know what he's going to do. He might score, he might assist, he might get sent off. He might do an amazing bit of skill. He might do something completely awful. But if you watch him for a whole game, he will do something kind of at either end of the spectrum, but it will be entertaining. So whenever if I have a cheeky bet builder or something on Sunday, there's always Pablo Fornals to score and be carded in there because I know he's capable of it. Whether it's ripping his shirt off or just launching into someone, he embodies what the Premier League is all about, and I greatly respect him for that.
Fantastic. I do like Pablo Fornal. I do EPL pods with Thiago, and we did like a season predictions thing. My prediction was Lampard was to get sacked, be the first one to get sacked in the season, and his was Marco Silva. And then we had a separate bet that we get a bonus point whoever got sacked first. And Marco Silva may be the most safest manager in the league at the minute.
Fulham have been fantastic, haven't they? Absolutely fantastic. Will the wheels fall off? Mitrovic stop scoring? Who knows? But yeah, I mean, they've been pretty impressive, and Mitrovic has been amazing.
He really is. But last word on Liverpool. I mean, I actually enjoy this. Maybe we'll try and make a monthly thing of it or something.
I like it as well. I think that's a good idea.
What's next for us then? Brighton. Let's go with a quick run through of our teams for Brighton. I mean, everyone's fit. We'll put an asterisk next to Naby in case he's not alive or he's been Mamadou Sakhoud. But team, is it just the same for Ajax?
Yeah, I think Alisson's in goal. Yeah. I mean, we haven't got a lot. Trent's got to be a right back. I know I kicked off earlier and said we need to try and find a way to bench him, but Trent's got to be a right back. I think Gomez, unfortunately, hasn't taken his chance in the team. Again, there's caveats to that and players around him, but I think Matip needs to come back in because he's done well when he has done. And the thing is, Gomez has benefited before from other defenders being injured or out of form and coming in and getting his chance. Other defenders have benefited from him being injured and coming in and getting their chance. Him and Matip are very often swapped around, even him and Morgan back in the day. He knows what the score is in terms of partner alongside Van Dijk. You've got to be patient, but because we are quite injury prone in the defence, you will get your chance. But if you get your chance, you've got to take it. And I just don't think he has. So I think Matip's got to come back in. Van Dijk, take your pick at left back. It will be Robertson, but I'd be fine with Simicast. I think he's looked just as good, if not better. And then we've gone over the midfield loads. So Fabinho, Trent, Keita? No, that's not definitely. Fabinho, Thiago, Harvey Elliott. And then I think for Brighton, I would actually go Salah, Diaz, Jota, and then I'd give Nunes the run against Rangers a few days later. And then maybe
you can even play like Jota.
A winner takes all for Arsenal at the weekend. Yeah, exactly. Jota's decent on the wing as well. You might want to rotate rest Salah or Diaz against Rangers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that team. Let it roll. But we will finish up there because I almost finished us in a timely manner, but then I fancy chatting about the Premier League. But we will finish up there. Thank you, Ollie. And if you do enjoy, just let me know either on Twitter or Discord. You know all the crack by now. We'll be tagged in on there. But if you want to keep this semi-regularly, we will because we got Albie. Well, let's finish. Favourite Albie haircut?
Favourite Albie haircut? It's the one this like spiky one when it coincides with one of my favourite Albie moments when he's doing his Unbelievable, Jack. Unbelievable, Jack. Which is a nice one to finish on because obviously I think you've probably seen on Twitter the Chris Kamara interview that came out with Stephen Bart this week, which was obviously a really touching one. And it's hopefully, Cammy, who's an absolute legend of the media game, has seen the outpouring that he's received on Twitter. And just typical, I'll find a way to touch that, link that lovely sentiment to a bit of Alberto Moreno just to finish off.
Yeah. Mine was the top knot, but he wasn't really playing then, so sad time.
Still though, still cool. He's a cool man who does cool things.
Exactly. But as I say, if you want this to be somewhat regular, let us know. But thank you, Ollie. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.